Are you ready, podcast? Time to demonstrate. Rachelle Logan, the etiquette queen, teaching us all how to thrive in the scene. Etiquette queen, she's on the scene. Professional development, living the dream. Public speaking, bridging the gap. Success is a journey, ain't no looking back. Knowledge is power, that's the truth. Learning from the best.
Welcome to the Are You Ready Show with your host, Lady Rachelle.
Greetings. This is Lady Rachelle of the Are You Ready Show. Welcome back. Today's show is being brought to you by Color Creations by D-Lo, bringing art to life and bringing joy to yours. Visit Color Creations by D-Lo at colorcreationsbydlo.etsy.com. Okay, guys, I have a treat for you today. I have a quick question though. How many of you feel that you don't really know who you are as a person now that you are an adult? How many of you had looked back at your childhood and saw some of the things that probably affected you in a way that could have changed your path? Or if it had not happened, you would have gone in a different direction. And I always say God has his plan for us. We just have to follow it. Today's show, I have just that person. I have a man named Michael Gordon Bennett. And Michael has a story to tell. I'm not even going to try to do an introduction to him because I want him to do that so that he can do it justice. And without further ado, welcome Michael.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is an honor for me.
Honey, this is an honor for me and my listeners because they're going to love it. So why don't you tell me a little bit about who you are?
Well, I am probably first and foremost a military brat. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the brat term, that means we are the dependent of somebody who was on active duty military. In my case, it was my father who joined the Air Force. I was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey, but my father joined the Air Force about 6 months after I was born, and I didn't really get to live in Atlantic City other than 1 year of my entire life, so I don't have a lot of reference to it. But it was the military lifestyle. You move one place, 2 or 3 years later, you pick up and move someplace else.
Don't I
2 or
know
3
it.
years after that, you pick up and move someplace else.
Yeah.
I think I went to 8 different schools before I graduated from high school.
Oh my gosh!
But I wouldn't trade the experience, no matter in my case how painful it was, for anything, because it taught some life lessons that I still carry with me to this day.
Right.
Wow. But it was hard. It was difficult, and I know we'll get into more of my story here in a second. But
yes.
It wasn't as easy as some people think it is. I always laughed because my cousins in Cleveland, my first cousins, they thought we were rich because we were military people traveling around, and they're living in inner city Cleveland. And I had to tell them, you don't know anything about the military. There's no such thing as being rich.
No, because they think you pay for everything. You got to pay. No, we don't pay for anything, but it's just a toll that it takes on a family. Right. That's where the cost comes in. Now, as a child, I know a lot of military brats because I had 2. And I had them later in my military career. Only my daughter was the one that had to move. But as a child growing up, you say you were in a different country. At what age?
We left for Spain in 1962, so I got there when I was 5.
Okay. Now, what was that like as a small child? Being an African American man, so going into Spain at that age.
It was different. Here's the thing that I really appreciate about what my father did. My father had only been in active duty for 5 years at that time. when you are in the military and you want base housing, they put you on a list. And back in those days, it was organized by rank. Well, my father, I think, had 2 stripes back then, so we were not going to get a house anytime soon.
Right.
So my father made the decision for us to live in the city of Madrid, which is Spain's capital city. And I believe at that time it was its largest city. I think Barcelona has since surpassed it. But I say all that to say we lived in a 10-story building. On the 2nd floor, we had a Spanish maid. All of my neighbors were Spanish. None of them spoke English.
Wow.
I'm 5 years old, and to this day, I still do not understand how my mother and father let me roam the streets of Madrid by myself as a 5-year-old, but they did. They said he's got to get out of the house. I eventually made Spanish friends, and then when I started kindergarten and 1st grade, our last hour of each day was spent learning Spanish.
Wow.
But as a African-American boy walking the streets of Madrid, I had, keep in mind the time frame we're talking about. We're talking about basically the seminal moments of the civil rights movement, 62, 63, 64, 65.
I was born in 61, so I know.
Yeah. I mean, and so the idea that I was a Black American never occurred to me. Because the Spaniards didn't treat us like that.
Exactly.
They treated us like we were just the guy down the street. My dad was best friends with the portero, which in Spanish means doorman, and the landlord for our building. So my dad and him would sit outside and drink beer during the daytime sometimes and just, have a good time. My dad spoke like 6 languages, so he was fluent in Spanish. And our maid helped me learn Spanish. And so it's just this thing. And I remember when President Kennedy was assassinated, we were in Spain.
Yeah.
The entire streets of Madrid got stone cold silent.
Oh, wow.
2 million people, complete silence. I remember I got up a day or 2 after his assassination, and I was walking down the street with our maid. Her name was Consuelo. And every Spaniard who knew I was American, I'm 5, 6 years old. They all ran out on the street hugging me, kissing me. Are you okay? They were in tears. I'm still 5 or 6 years old. I don't understand the significance of what happened.
Yeah.
But, and then, I finally, obviously as an adult, I picked up on the memo real quick. But, my dad didn't come home for like a week because he went on alert. Everything at Torrejon Air Base, which is the base that was in Madrid, was shut down.
Wow.
And so, you get this thing about the culture of another country.
Yeah.
That was probably the best learning experience I ever had in my life, was living in Spain. The downside to it was when we got back to the United States and I all of a sudden got reminded on a daily basis that I was Black.
Yeah. And that is the unfortunate part, because you were a child.
Right.
They looked at you as just another person to even show compassion. And you're like, okay, why is everybody crying? But then what was your next duty station?
From there, we went to Loring Air Force Base, Maine. For anybody who has any idea of where Loring Air Force Base is, Interstate 95 ends in Holton, Maine.
Oh.
You get on US 1 and continue for about another 150 miles further north, and you will wind up at Loring Air Force Base, or what was Loring Air Force Base then. Loring Air Force Base is in Aroostook County, just north of Caribou and Limestone and Presque Isle. And it's potato country. Maine's famous for potatoes. And they basically took some land from the potato farmers and turned it into an Air Force base. And the reason Loring was built in the first place was it allowed the B-52 bombers, keep in mind, this is the Cold War we're talking about. It allowed those B-52 bombers to fly over the Arctic Circle into Russia in case they had to drop bombs on the Soviet Union. And that was its claim to fame. And it was bitterly cold.
It sounds cold still to this day.
My God. I mean, we got to, we left Spain, I think it was November. And, Spain, central Spain is hot. It's like almost like living in Vegas.
Right.
And we had no winter clothes when we got to Maine. My dad had to run to the store and buy us all coats and long pants and everything. We had none of that stuff. We stayed inside for a week, except my dad. My dad had to go report for work and let them know he was in town. Other than that, we all stayed in the house. It was so cold.
Oh my gosh. And a culture shock.
Yeah, and a culture shock. My birthday's in January, and for the 4 years we lived in Maine, January 8th, for the 4 years we lived in Maine, school was canceled every time because the temperatures were 20 and 30 below zero with 150 feet of snow on the ground.
I can't imagine. That just made a chill run through me right now.
Yeah, and you got and it would start snowing sometimes as early as the first week of September, depending on what was going on. And the snow melt would start in late April with torrents of water running down the streets from the snow melt.
Wow.
By day. By night, it would freeze.
Wow. Okay, so how old are you when you leave Maine?
I was 11 when we left Maine.
And where did you go?
We went back to Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is where my grandparents and my family are all from. I spent a year in Atlantic City. And this was my first experience living in the Black community. If you know anything about Atlantic City,
I go there often.
I
go there often.
The whole north side is Black. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not the casino. Remember, there were no casinos back then.
Oh, okay. Okay.
This is 1969.
Okay.
So there's no casinos.
Oh.
So what was Atlantic City famous for? Well, three things: the boardwalk. The Miss America pageant,
yes,
was the other thing that it was famous for, and eventually it became famous for the movie Boardwalk Empire.
Yes,
and the other thing it became famous for is the board game Monopoly. The original board game Monopoly are all streets of Atlantic City.
Oh wow, what history! What history!
Yeah, I learned a lot, but it was. Now, keep in mind, I'm 11. I'm tall. I'm 5'9" as an 11-year-old.
Okay.
And I'm skinny as a rail, and I have this quirky New England accent from living in Maine for 4 years.
Right, because at that age, you were impressionable with accents.
Oh, yeah. And if you thought I had an easy time with those Black kids in the Atlantic City area, you are sadly mistaken. They made so much fun of me. Some of them tried to beat me up, but obviously when you get 3 or 4 of them together, they get a little bravado in them. And of course, I didn't know how to fight. My dad was one of those people my dad was like a brawler, skinny as he was, but he never passed that on to me. And all of a sudden, he's in Vietnam, and I'm having to figure this out on my own.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was, and I remember my grandfather was a foreman on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, and he used to go to work around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. About once or twice a week, he would take me with him. He'd say, "You want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got to get out of this house." So we would walk up to the boardwalk, which is about 7 or 8 miles from 7 or 8 blocks, from their house. And all the foremen looked at me and, that's your grandson, Harry? Yeah, he is. And of course, then they heard me speak, and I'm like, where'd you get that accent from?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I'm going to take a quick break. And everybody, this is the perspective of a military brat. Y'all know I have military people on. I am military. I always give the perspective of being in the military. This is a different thing. When you have a child that has to travel and do this, it's like, okay, what did they go through? And this is why I'm doing this, to give people an idea that it's not just the military person themselves that, have to adjust. We adjusted as we were told. A child doesn't get manuals and instructions and all that on how to be a military child. And Michael has probably done more by the time he was 11 than most of you have done in your entire life, because he was actually part of the military and his mother. So when we come back, I'm going to have Michael discuss how his childhood, traveling around, learning to speak different languages, impacted him as he began to grow into adult. Just a reminder, please visit RachelleLoganMedia.com for etiquette classes, books, and puzzles for children. I will be right back. Want to help your child shine with confidence and kindness? Introducing Table Manners, Public Speaking, and Everyday Etiquette Manners, fun, interactive coloring and activity books designed to teach important life skills. These books are packed with exciting games and activities that make learning manners and social skills fun. They're perfect for your children, students, and even as gifts. Get your copies today at RachelleLoganMedia.com and give the gift of confidence and kindness. Welcome back to the Are You Ready show. I'm not even going to say any more other than, Michael, please continue.
Will do.
Okay.
We arrived in Atlantic City in August of '69. My dad, believe it or not, volunteered for Vietnam. That's how bad he wanted us to get out of Maine. And he knew he was going to be sent there anyway, so he just decided to get over it and make the volunteer. So he comes home in August of 1970. He's been gone exactly a year to the day. And I remember about 3 months before he came home, he sends my mom this letter. And she gave me part of it to read, and it says, "We're moving to Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida." Keep in mind, we don't know where Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida is, but so I showed my grandfather the letter. He goes out and pulls, those old atlas maps?
Yes, I still have mine.
Yeah, so he grabbed the map, he put it in the kitchen counter for me, and Mom and I were sitting here hunting for Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. It took us like an hour. We still couldn't find it. It never dawned on us that Florida has a panhandle section that was on another page.
Oh, God.
So we switched to the other page, and we find it, and we see it's right on the Gulf of Mexico and the Florida Panhandle. We're thinking beaches and sunshine, and my mom and I are excited. My two little sisters, they don't know about what's going on yet. It was really exciting for us. And the only thing at that point was we had to stop and think, please, I'm old enough to watch the nightly news on TV now.
Yeah.
And so I watched, the Huntley Brinkley Report, which is my dad's favorite. I watched Walter Cronkite. I knew about what was going on in Vietnam, but we were just praying he got home without being injured or maimed or killed.
Yeah.
He made it home. We moved to Florida. This is where my life began to get complicated, because my ignorance of everything that was Black America came to the fold. It came hard and heavy. And what I mean by that is I was in 7th grade when we got to Tyndall Air Force Base. Tyndall Air Force Base, which for those of you who don't know is in Panama City, Florida. It's on the Florida Panhandle, right on the Gulf of Mexico. Right. It's about 100 miles southwest of Tallahassee and about 100 miles east of Pensacola. And we're there, 7th grade. And it's the first time our family had ever been down south. We knew nothing about living down south. Keep in mind, this is 1970.
Yeah.
It was the first year they used forced busing to desegregate the school systems down south. And to put that in perspective for a person like me, I had no clue what they were desegregating. So 7th grade, and my school was off base. My sisters got lucky. The elementary school was on Tyndall Air Force Base, but the middle school, or what we called the junior high school back then, and the high school were off base. So every day, these big blue U.S. Air Force buses would drive us 25 miles down to a school, which was originally an all-black high school in Panama City. Keep in mind, 90 to 95% of my neighbors are white.
Yeah.
We're being bused to an all-black school. To say I had any friends would be a gross overstatement. I had none.
Wow.
Probably for the first 6 to 8 months that I was there. The Black students didn't know what to do with me. By this time, I'm pushing 6 feet tall, which is exceedingly tall for a 7th grader. I was a straight-A student. My white neighbors didn't spend a lot of time talking to me at all. That was the beginning of a journey of life lessons. Now, to give you more perspective, the Southeastern Conference football, which is the big football conference down south, they were not desegregated yet. That didn't happen until 1972.
Wow.
So, and keep in mind the Brown versus Board of Education decision that led to eventually the busing passed in 1954. So there's like this 16 to 17 year gap in there where all of this stuff was being put in place for desegregation and busing and trying to integrate these schools. It was a history that I knew nothing about. And I don't want to say my parents didn't know anything about it. They just weren't prepared for it. So they never gave me any of these life lessons to learn to teach me how to deal with being down south.
Wow.
I remember walking to, there was my dentist. I had braces as a child. My orthodontist was about a mile away from my school. My parents had me walk there one day, and I basically got accosted, beat up by a couple of black kids on my way there. And I remember running to the rest of the way to the dentist's office, and my orthodontist called my dad because I had blood running down my shirt from my braces where I got hit. And, this is the environment that I had been thrown into.
Wow.
Now, let's compound all that with one other issue. My dad came back from Vietnam with a serious case of PTSD, which he never, even until his passing, recovered from.
Wow.
So the loving, nurturing guy who would put his arms around me and hug me and take me out to play ball with me and stuff when he went to Vietnam was not the guy we got back.
Wow.
And at 12 years old, I don't understand what PTSD is. Neither did my mother.
Yeah.
None of us understood it. All we know is he became an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And my father, and I probably should preface this too, because this is actually a key component to my childhood. My father looks white.
Okay.
His mother is African American, a light-skinned African American woman, but he never knew who his biological father was. The family knew, and they took the secret to the grave with him.
Oh wow!
With all of them, they knew who it was, and it was somebody famous. My dad was born in Baltimore. It was somebody famous in Baltimore.
Wow!
But they didn't want to say who it was. And my grandmother was 15 when she had him. So, not wanting to raise my father, they shipped him off to Philadelphia to be raised by an aunt.
Yeah.
So my father doesn't have that close bonding relationship with his mother because she didn't raise him.
Wow.
So going back to Panama City for a minute, when my dad used to come pick me up to take me to doctor's appointments or check me out of school early, I'll never forget this story. He walks into the office, they get on the speakerphone and tell me to report to the office and check out. The next day when I came back to school, I caught hell from my black teammates who, by the way, were classmates. At this time, they had already started speaking to me for another reason, which I'll get into in a minute. Those kids, Michael Bennett, you're Daddy White. Michael Bennett, you're Daddy White. You can't talk to me.
Oh, my God.
They all quit talking to me for about 3 weeks. None of them would speak to me. And, of course, my white classmates knew my father from being on the military base. We're all living on top of each other.
Right.
I don't want to say they didn't bat an eyelash at my dad's skin complexion, but they let it slide. It was just part of the fabric of being in the military.
Wow.
Well, I got a lucky break. About 3 weeks after my dad came to get me, my mother came to get me for another orthodontist appointment. And my mother is drop dead gorgeous. My mother looks like a model. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, I was their best friend. The next day, I was their best buddy.
Wow.
And, so I had to live through all this stuff, not understanding the history of the South. Selma, Alabama is only 150 miles from Panama City, Florida.
Exactly.
I knew nothing about the march.
That's right.
I mean, we were living in Spain during the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing,
Yeah.
the march, the assassination of Malcolm X. Obviously, I've been to President Kennedy. Anything that you could think of that was a seminal moment in the civil rights movement, we were in Spain. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, we were living in Maine. I had no clue who Dr. King was, but I remember sitting at one of my classmates' house. They were white. We were playing Army Men on the floor like kids did back then. When they made the announcement on TV that Dr. King had been assassinated, the father of this classmate of mine started celebrating. And the mom looks over at me, sees this little black boy sitting in her house, and she says, "Here's something, let's get your coat on." She was very nice to me, and let's get you home. So I ran home, and then I had to ask my parents about who Dr. King was and why they used the N-word in reference to him. And my dad was livid, because that's a word we never used in our house.
Right.
And he wanted to go over and fight, and my mom talked him out of it. But, so, I know nothing about Panama City, Florida, the South, Alabama, Georgia. None of that stuff resonates with me. And I actually, by the time I was in 8th grade, I was already 6'2". And I was the only kid in school not on a sports team.
Oh, wow.
Was probably in the top 5% of the best athletes in the entire county.
Right.
And so Because
they automatically assume.
They assumed.
And
I had Yeah, and I had never touched a basketball, by the way. Never in my life had I touched a basketball.
Oh my gosh.
So I remember I came home from school one day and I told my dad I was going to sign up to play football. And he looked at me like I was nuts. No 6'2", 130-pound kid belongs on a football field. But it was me wanting to make friends. That was my entree into the world of making friends with mainly the guys, because the girls already liked me. That was me. And my teammates, they used to beat me at practice so bad. They would take shots at me because I was a wide receiver. They would deliberately take shots at me to try to hurt me during practice because they knew that was their license to hit me because they couldn't do it during normal class time.
Oh, yeah.
They broke my ribs a couple times.
Oh, no.
And fortunately for me, my PE coach, a guy named Andrew Colvin, I'll never forget, he took a liking to me that he always protected me. And he saw those kids taking their anger out on me for, who I was. And he always, even when I became an adult and moved away, he always defended me. He always looked out for me. He always did things for me. He made sure I went to college, even though I struggled. We can talk about that later. I didn't struggle academically. I just struggled just getting in because of my military career, my dad's PTSD. But long story short, by the time I left Panama City, I was in high school, I was 16. By the time I left Panama City, I had made it my mission in life to take the black kids who were down in the inner city of Panama City, dirt poor, by the way, and they weren't the only ones. Panama City was one of the first places I'd ever seen where black folks and white folks were almost equally as poor as one another. We were living in trailer parks with rusted out bottoms. If you looked at the directly across the street from Rosenwald, what was the junior high school, those old grayish looking buildings that look like slave quarters?
Yes.
There was a couple of those across the street from my school with black families in them, and the wood was so warped on some of those places I could see straight into the living room from my school parking lot, right into the living rooms.
And this is from the viewpoint of a child.
This is from the viewpoint of a child who got a quick baptism in race relations 101 from my experiences.
My goodness.
And so, I made it a point. I got my driver's license right at age 16. My mom taught me how to drive, and her and my dad signed off on me getting a driver's license. So what I would do on weekends is I would go down into the place where I grew up, the school area, and I would have 2 or 3 black kids get in the car with me. I drove them back to Tyndall Air Force Base, and I did that on purpose. I recognized that they were never going to see something else unless I helped them see something else.
Right.
Most of these kids had never left the 50-mile radius of their front door.
Right.
So seeing the interaction of a mixed race group of people in uniform and following structure and seeing what we had, and they made the same assumptions my cousins did. They thought we were rich. We weren't rich. My dad worked 2 and 3 jobs at the same time. He was on active duty most of the time. Yeah,
got to make ends meet. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, when we were stationed in New Hampshire, which was pre-Spain, my dad worked 3 jobs. He worked his military job. He was the manager of the officers club at night, and he would go scrub bedpans at the very hospital where he was the hospital administrator until his shift started for his military side of the job.
Wow,
that's a lot of work for one man.
Yeah.
And he slept 2 hours a night.
Wow.
So we get through all this. So by the time I leave Panama City, I'm like this local folk hero. And, I know you have reference to my book. I wrote a book called 710 Split.
Yes.
And the subtitle is My Journey as America's Whitest Black Kid, which you'll get the reference for that already.
Exactly.
But the 710 Split is a metaphor. For anybody who knows the game of bowling, the 7 and the 10 are the 2 pins at the opposite ends of the lane. It's like the widest gap between 2 pins in a bowling lane. Oh. And I use it as a metaphor with the 7 pin representing the black community and the 10 pin representing the white community, and the fact that I was caught in the middle in this web of whatever I was caught in. And so that I wrote the book with that title. Why did I choose 710 Split? I won the Florida State Bowling Championship as a 15-year-old.
Wow.
All of a sudden, I'm this fantastic hero in the Panama City market because I've got a lot of attention. I got media interviewing me. I got the local TV station interviewing me. I got people presenting me awards and things like that. And just happened to have coincided with me winning I forgot the exact title of the award from school, but I was the best athlete in the school who lettered in more than 3 sports. I eventually did play basketball, and I got pretty good at it. So this so, this, all, So this, all, all of this happened within a 6-month time frame of each other.
You know what? 6 months. You know what? 6 months. 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 6 months I have gotten to the end of this show. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to continue this for part 2. This is the end of my show. Thank you so much, Michael, for your amazing story. I'm sure that the listeners enjoyed this. I can't wait for everybody to hear part 2 next week. So please tune in. The reason for my show is I look to inspire, uplift, and educate you with information that will bridge the gap for you to be the best version of yourself. This is Lady Rachelle of the Are You Ready Show. Thank you for watching my channel. Be sure to check out my website, RachelleLoganMedia.com. You can find the link in the description. I also have an online school teaching public speaking, etiquette, and much more. I also wrote multiple books for adults and children that will teach you to become the best version of yourself. Thank you and see you next time.